Hi guys, so I have here today is the Kvetun arming sword, which I'm going to review today. This is not mine, but it is something that someone from Basingstoke lent to me just to clean up and allowed me to make a review of this. I have used this a couple of times, just borrowed this, and I can make a fair review upon this, and the guy who uses this I spar with a lot, so I have a fair understanding of what it is like to go against this and actually use it as well. So here we go. In terms of the actual dimensions and pricings, I'll go into that now. So a base price of €210, and depending on the tip, so it's free for a rolled tip. I personally would go for that. I think it's safer. You can have a spatulated or rolled tip, which is an extra €20. You also have an additional amount for the shipping, and that depends on where you are on the globe. It's usually about €40, and then obviously import tax and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a lot more than €210, but that is the base price of this blade. Okay. And the weight of this sword is said to be on the website is 1,045 grams. Well, 1,400 is more of a two-handed sword weight. And we are at 1,040-ish. So it's in the mark. It's bang on the mark there. It was good. I can't keep this still on the scale, so I'm not going to get a massive weight unless I put it on like this. 1,041. That's a much better way of doing it. You can't see what I'm doing, but I've just laid it across the balance point because there's nothing else but like a crossguard and pommel. Anyway, so we have a 1-year warranty on this blade, which is fine, and I don't expect many people to have any issues with this blade. I have one issue, a breakage with a longsword way back, and they ended up replacing it within days. So the fact that if anything happens, you can go to them, email them, and they will deal with the problem. Okay, so they're pretty good with that. There are variations with this blade. You can either have a crossguard that is curved or straight. You can have the grip to be either leather or cord bound. So those are your variations there. So I'm going to go through the blade itself from top to bottom. The peen finish is fine. It's not sticking out anywhere. The actual finish itself is not completely flush like a rivet head or anything like that, but it's certainly not going to bother you in any capacity. It is just there as a functional thing to keep everything in place. It's doing its job, and over a year or so, I think this must be nearly might be 2 years he's had this, but certainly over a year. It's not moving and it's not jiggling about anywhere, and it's stayed nice and true and it's nice and solid. So that is good. That's keeping the peen is doing its job. The tang is nice and it's fitted very well to this pommel, which is great. The actual dimensions of the pommel. Now, I have a couple of things to say here. Personally, I would like something a little flatter and larger, but that's a personal preference. The size of the pommel itself, destroying the table, the size is okay historically. I would prefer to have it a little larger and flatter, but that's like I said, a personal preference. And we have these protrusions out, if I can even say that correctly. That's perfectly historical. There's loads of finds in the 14th and 15th centuries which has these so wheel pommel with these sticky outy bits, sort of like an embossed inner part. That's more of a design thing. Sometimes historically they would have emblems, things that were fitted into there, and other materials, but this is fine. Yeah, this is your basic arming sword design, and it looks okay. It's taken a little bit of damage from hits, and it's taken a little bit of damage from sweat rust. So human elements have impeded on the finish of this. I could go over this with sandpaper to forever and get a nice fit and finish on this, but this is getting used nearly once or maybe twice a week, and to actually keep on cleaning this and getting all the rust off to the point where it's a mirror polish, it's no point in doing that. All you need to do is just keep it in good condition so there's no surface rust building up. So moving on to the grip, fit and finish is fine. This is a leather bound grip, and the stitching is nice and even and consistent, and the actual leather itself stayed true. There's only one sort of cut, so in terms of wear and tear, this has held up very well over the past year or so. And the swelling in the center aids the ergonomics of the blade, which is good. It's flat either side to allow blade alignment, and you can easily tell where the sword is in your hand, even wearing gloves. The actual blade grip length, I would personally have this maybe about 1 centimeter shorter, but again, that's a personal preference. And you've got to remember that if you're in a competition or you're sparring or whatever, you're going to have protective gloves on, which, you know, adds to the width of your hand. So when you actually have this in your hand, it actually feels okay, it's fine. And you're going to have some kind of handshake grip, not a hammer fist grip. Yeah, this does rely on the cut. You can thrust with this, but you will probably have a handshake grip just to allow the pommel to aid in cutting. So especially those back edge cuts where you go around and you get the top of their head. It's almost like a Sturzhau type thing in sword and buckler. And the pommel does a good job in at the base of the hand. Given the fact that my hand is just, I'd like to say a medium size, but I'll measure it for you, the width of my hand, because everybody's different. Okay, so the width of my hand is about 9.5, 9.75 centimeters. Width from here to there, and if you could just see here like that, and it fits okay hammer fist wise, but you would want to have a handshake grip just so, because that it just naturally fits like that, and the way that you use the blade, you will want to have that kind of handshake grip, not a ham fist like that. Yeah. So that's the grip itself. Let's move on to the crossguard. Like I said, you can either have it curved or straight like this. The actual like there's a little ridge in the center there, and it sort of wastes throughout the quillon and then it expands to the end here. These are nicely rounded, yeah, so it's not going to fray or damage any of your gloves or equipment or whatever. These are nicely rounded, but the pommel itself could be rounded a little furthermore just for aid of comfort. But the crossguard in itself has not taken any damage, and it's taken, you can easily tell that there's been cuts. Significant parries have been made on this crossguard, and it is completely, if I can make a ringing sound, that is completely solid to the blade itself. The fit and finish of the blade, so this is fantastic. There is no gap, although historically there are swords that have a gap in this crossguard. It does happen, but the actual fit and finish, there is, you wouldn't even be able to get a piece of paper or anything or a needle in any of these gaps. The fit and finish between the shoulder of the blade going into the tang from the crossguard is excellent. That is a very well fitted crossguard, just so for this blade. It's really good. And like I said, it's really on there and it's not going to go anywhere. So that's great. We'll move down to the blade. We've got a diamond section blade. We've got an ever so small ricasso. It's probably about a centimetre, and it leads on to a diamond section blade. Blade itself is nice and blunt, so for the cut it's gonna... So regarding the cut, you've got to remember that this is pretty much a historically, like the dimensions are quite historical compared to, say, right, again it changes here and there, you have S-stocks and things like that, but this side sword number 1, you can see how thin this blade is compared to this arming sword, yeah? So that's nice and thin. It's also thicker, so when you do hit people, they're going to notice it, but it's not going to hurt them. Whereas this has got a thinner edge, and there is more material there. If I just put this back, so when you do hit someone with this, it's going to have a bit more impact to a smaller area. So that kind of choppiness, you just got to bear that in mind, yeah? So it won't get disqualified from any competitions. I reckon this has been used throughout Europe for competitions, and America, well, the world really, for competitions, especially when it's just arming sword and buckler. You do get competitions where they'll allow a side sword and buckler as well as the arming sword, just like in Wessex League. But if you hit someone on the cutting portion of this, don't swing to break their bones. You know, you need a nice controlled hit, and it's hard to do with just one arm, yeah? If you're just swinging away, this is gonna do some damage on some people, so just bear that in mind, yeah? The fact that it's a diamond section is great, it's fine, it's perfectly historical. There are some arming swords, plenty, that have fullers in them, and that's absolutely fine. A diamond section is good, and it does flatten out towards the end of the blade here. You do see a lot of distal taper, especially with the thickness of the blade, and it thins out to here, to the foible, and it really goes to probably about 12 millimeters, maybe about 11 millimeters, right to the tip here. So you do get a nice nimble blade here, yeah? The balance is further out than some. There you go. So we're about 3 inches, something like that. It's on the website, the balance point. So it's not clunky, it's not blade heavy or anything like that. You can swing this, but there is a presence of the blade. It's not overcoming it though. I reckon there's plenty of blades out there historically that have a similar type of point of balance, and you do get a sense of where the point is, yeah? There are all kinds of nodes and things like that in terms of cutting capacity, or balance points, and movability and all that kind of thing. But you know exactly where the point is at any given moment of time, which aids in the thrust. Absolutely fine. Especially when you've got a grip like this that you can use handshake grip for, to aid in a thrust. Okay, so that's fine. So that's the blade itself. It has taken damage. I have used a file to go over any of the burrs. There was only one that was sort of sticking out. Other than that, it's no problem at all. Is because the blade edge is slightly thinner than say some side swords, it's going to take a little bit more damage than I would say in most. Just given the fact that it's a wider blade, they've made the edge slightly thinner, but not so thin it's going to be disqualified from any competitions. Yeah. The tip itself, well, is just the standard rolled tip, which is fine. There's no issues with the rolling and the finish of it. It's perfectly good for the thrust. So if I press my hand into it, I'm not feeling, like that's going to hurt anybody. Okay. Regarding the thrust, the quality of the steel that is used, you can bend it to 90 degrees and it remains true and straight. Yeah. So if you do end up having one of those close thrusts where the whole blade sort of goes at 90 degrees, you're like, oh no, I've bent my blade. You probably won't. So you've got that to consider. You have a safe thrusting blade that is going to stay true, and the fact that I don't need to press that much for it to flex like that is great, because it also isn't floppy at all. Given the fact that this is a 1,000 gram arming sword, which is probably on the higher end, it doesn't feel very floppy. I can feel a little bit of movement towards the end of the blade here, but nothing significant. Yeah, so you'll know where the tip is if it's not in your view at any given moment, and when you do a thrust, you don't need to worry that you're going to hurt the other person, which is great. And regarding the actual, because the blade's distal taper, the bend in the blade is going to happen 2/3 of the way through, just like in most blades. The bend happens mostly here, less so on the fort, more towards the foible, and at the cutting sort of portion of the blade, that's where it flexes most. Yeah, and like I said, it remains true and it's held up great. I reckon there's been plenty of thrusts done with this, but it's mostly cutty, more of a cutting blade. But overall, very nice. Yeah, Kvetun has a high standard in terms of its objects, and they're successful because of that. Yeah, I do want to just show off all my objects that I have, but when you can absolutely do this with sword and buckler. There's no problems with this at all. It's not going to impede against anything because it's a nice sort of cruciform sword. You've just got your crossguard and pommel, so it's not going to go against anything. The crossguard isn't too long. However, there are a lot of crossguards that do extend further out from this. There's some that are shorter, so this is like a nice medium. It's not going to nick against anything. Yeah, I should maybe have not picked the metal one, but like I said, if you're going to do 133, this is great for that. This is the type of thing that you need for 133, this type of sword. And the fact that Kvetun do that is great, because it's taking up 133 is this huge text that a lot of people devote a lot of time to, and the fact that there is a sword that you can do sparring with and practice with and drilling with is great. So yeah, 133 sword and buckler, absolutely fine. Yeah. And then we have sword and board. Heater shield, absolutely fine. You can do all kinds of things, just like with the buckler. If you're into reenactment, this would be absolutely fine. So when it comes to 14th century stuff, like late 14th century or mid 14th century, you can certainly fit this well with that period, and do all the things that you do with heater shield and arming sword, all those images that you see. Okay, so I'm going to just compare a couple of things with the side sword. So this is the side sword number 1 from Kvetun. There is a difference between the blade length. The blade length and all those sort of finite dimensions and all that kind of thing. They're on the website, by the way. I never did actually say how long the blade length is. I'll quickly do that now. So the blade length is 80 centimeters, and then the crossguard length is 18. Well, it's pretty much 17 and a half. The grip length is about 11 centimeters. So those are the basic dimensions. 80 centimeters for the blade is great for competition, perfectly serviceable, and that will work well for pretty much all of Europe. On the continent, so in the UK, we have Wessex League. That'll be fine. However, if you're going to do Wessex League and sword and buckler, I would probably prefer to do with side sword, because you can do that. However, on the continent, there are rules of just using an arming sword. The length of this arming sword is absolutely fine for most competitions, if not all competitions on the continent. I'm not sure about the US or anything like that. There are variations in the way that the rules are on what kind of blade you can have, but this, absolutely fine. Yeah, you're going to be good for pretty much all, because there are limitations on blade length. Yeah, with the arming swords, there's some that go further than the blade length, but this is good, and it remains not too short either. So it's a good sort of medium. And like I said, with the type of blade, this is a lot wider than this. The actual grip length is shorter with this. However, you can use the finger rings. This you cannot use the finger rings, and you'll probably be told off if you end up doing something like having the finger over the crossguard in a competition, just because if a blade slides down, you're going to get your index finger mashed. So historically, that you do see some texts having it like this on some manuscripts, and you do mainly see this. Yeah. So that is fine, and I would stick to having your index finger below the crossguard. But that does mean that you're going to have to rely on a pretty heavy cut, sort of a controlled cut, if you use the finger over the crossguard. But that's a whole different topic altogether in terms of ergonomics inside and arming swords. Okay, so I'm probably going to finish up here because I'm babbling on and on and on. But overall, fantastic. It's held up great. The dimensions are good for competitions if you're worried about that. It's lasted quite some time without any issues. The only issues that I would say is maybe round off this pommel slightly, just for aid of comfort, and the fact that the blade edge is significantly thinner here, given the fact that it's quite wide. You're going to have some burrs on this blade over time, and I will show a close-up of the blade and where the burrs are, because that is significant. I don't think it's much of an issue, but it's just something to bear in mind. Okay. Yeah, that is it. I think I haven't shown you with this, because there are some competitions where you will probably have to have a heavier gauntlet, and yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, this fits on a sparring glove great, and just the same with the Kvetun lobster heavy spez. You can absolutely use this just fine. Okay, sorry, I did skip that over a little bit. I only saw this in the corner of my eye and I was like, oh, I haven't talked about that. But yeah, overall, fantastic. Great for 14th and 15th century, great for competitions, and great for practicing 133. And anything else like that as well. So I shall finish there. So this has been the Arming Sword by Kvetun. I would certainly recommend this, and yeah, really good. So I'll finish there, and I hope you have a good day, and I shall see you guys on the next one. Cheers, folks.